This video is lesson 17 of the Hands-on Equations learning system. And in this video, we're going to look at how you can solve basic addition and subtraction problems with negative numbers by using the Hands-on Equations learning pieces. You'll notice that there's a new set of blocks, and just like the blue and the white pawn, the X and the star are opposite of each other, the red and the green blocks are also opposites of each other. So if I were to set up the expression at the top of the screen, 2 plus a negative 2, or you could think of that as positive 2 plus negative 2, it would look like this. It would have a red block that would represent the positive 2, and a green block that would represent the negative 2. Now, because the positives and the negatives, the reds and the greens, are opposites of each other, we would expect this to balance out with a 0 on the other side of the equation. And it doesn't matter whether we choose to have red or green as that 0 because it has no value. So let's now look at another example. And in this example, I'm going to set up the expression negative 3 plus negative 5. So let me write that on here. Negative 3 plus negative 5. And when we set that up, we'd have a green 3 and a green 5. And just like with the red blocks, if we were to have a positive 3 and a positive 5, we would say that's the same thing as a positive 8. Well, it's going to work exactly the same way with the green blocks. If I have a 3 and a 5 that are both green, that will balance out with a green 8, which would be equal to negative 8. Okay, let's look at another example. And let me clear all this off of here. And in this example, we're going to look at negative 3 plus positive 5. So I'm just going to put negative 3 plus 5. And let's see if we can figure out what that is equal to. Well, negative 3 would be a green block. And then plus 5, because there is not a sign by the 5, and remember, this is an operation. If there were a sign by this 5, we put parentheses around it because the sign would be right next to the operation. Because there's not a sign by the 5, it's assumed to be positive. So here's our setup for this expression, negative 3 plus positive 5. And to help us solve this, let's think of this positive 5 right here. Let's think of this positive 5 as 3 plus 2. In fact, let me replace it with 3 plus 2. We know that 3 plus 2 is, of course, equal to 5. And now you probably can see a solution here because we know this green and the red form a 0 pair. They're opposites of each other. So they have absolutely no value. So I can remove them from the balance. So obviously my solution is going to be 2. So negative 3 plus 5 is equal to a positive 2. Let's look at some examples with subtraction now. So I'll reset our board here. And let's look at the example of negative 10 minus negative 5. Now notice I'm putting parentheses here because I have a sign right next to an operation. And just like we did in previous lessons with setting up the X's and stars, when we're setting up this expression, we're going to have to do some taking away as part of our setup process. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put negative 10. But then what we want to do is we want to take away 5 negatives. And right now we do have 5 negatives. It would be a little bit difficult for us to take them away in the way that's set up right now. But I'm going to exchange my negative 10 for 2 negative 5s, which is of course the same value as negative 10. And now as part of my original setup process, I can take away 5 negatives. So when I take away 5 negatives, I know that the other side of the balance would have to be equal to negative 5. So the solution to negative 10 minus negative 5 is negative 5. Let's look at one more example. And I'll reset the board here. This will be another subtraction problem. And this time we're going to do positive 5 and we're going to subtract negative 3 and see what that balances with. When I set this up, I'm going to start out with a positive 5. But then what I want to do is take away 3 negatives. Well, right now I don't have 3 negatives to take away. So this is where you're going to have to think back to the strategy we used when we wanted to take away, for example, an X-Men or a star and we didn't have any of them. Think about what we did. Well, we knew that an X-Men and a star together form a 0 pair. So because they form a 0 pair, we could add them to either side of the balance without changing the value on that particular side of the balance. Well, we can do the same thing with our number cubes. So knowing that we need 3 negatives, I'm going to add a 0 pair that involves 3 negatives, and here's my 0 pair. So it involves 3 negatives here, but it is a 0 pair because it has a positive 3 and a negative 3 right next to each other. Now, as part of the setup process, I can now take away my negative 3, and now I know that the number that goes on the opposite side of the balance, so that this is a true equation, is positive 8. So we can use the hands-on equation system to model basic addition and subtraction of integers, and integers are just whole numbers that can be positive or negative. And if we are modeling just regular addition of positive and negative numbers, we just have to remember that negatives and positives are opposites of each other, so that they will end up canceling each other out. And when we are subtracting integers, sometimes we may have to add a 0 pair so that we can complete the setup process.